Hello, I'm Horceror. I want to find out what makes every single killer tick. There's one big glaring issue with that though. I play the Nemesis, essentially only the Nemesis. I physically cannot get thousands of hours of experience on every single character. So, I'm going to be interviewing people that do have those thousands of hours. One for every single killer. Welcome to Stars of the Fog. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Stars of the Fog. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of a different one, seeing as how my guest isn't here. Now why, you may ask? Well, that's because the number one Nemesis player, SanSanSan, is a player from Japan. Ergo, a language barrier would make the classic style of interview difficult, seeing as they can't speak English and I can't speak Japanese. To circumvent this issue, I simply messaged SanSanSan over Twitter all of the questions that I had, and they sent me their answers back in both English and Japanese. And, of course, I'll be doing my best to put in both their input on questions as well as my own, seeing as I am the number two Nemesis player. SanSanSan gave me full permission to elaborate a bit further on their answers, and just to try and make them flow better in English. For this, and to make it feel like a back and forth, I hired a Japanese voice actor, Tetsuya, to speak on behalf of SanSanSan. So, who is SanSanSan?
SanSanSan という日本のデッドバイデイライトプレイヤーです。
I am a Japanese Dead by Daylight player named SanSanSan.
プレイ時間は8700時間ほど。ネメシスが出た時からメインキラーとして使い続けています。
I have about 8,700 hours of playtime, and I've been playing Nemesis since his release in 2021.
触手ダウンランキングで1位だが、ただ楽しんでゲームをしている一人のプレイヤーです。だから自分がプレイスキルに長けているとは思っていないです。
While I am number one on the leaderboard for Tentacle Downs, I think of myself more so as a player that just enjoys the game. So I don't think I'm very good. I just like playing the game. And I, Horceror, if you don't already know me, am the current number two Nemesis player on the leaderboard for Whipdowns. I like to think I'm at least decent at Nemesis, but I definitely still have a lot to learn, personally, as well. I had a pretty similar start to SanSanSan to Nemesis, except I didn't start on his release. I came back to Dead by Daylight around July of 2021, and I didn't even really start playing the Nemesis until November of the same year. And speaking of getting into Dead by Daylight, what got you into the game? When did you start?
2018年、ザ・スピリットが追加された頃ですね。
I started in 2018, just around the time that Spirit was getting added.
ちょうど日本をテーマにしたコンテンツでしたが、偶然でした。
While the chapter was themed around Japanese culture, that was just a coincidence.
このゲームを始めた理由は、妻が YouTube を見て面白いと言っていたからです。
I actually started playing Dead by Daylight because my wife saw it on YouTube and said it looked interesting.
妻はゲームをプレイしてないが、ジオラマを作って楽しんでます。
My wife doesn't play games, but she does enjoy making Dead by Daylight dioramas. My own story was less so one where I came to the game and stuck with it. I actually started to play in 2017 with a few of my friends back when Dead by Daylight was just a game with a few killers and all we really played was customs. As a friend group, we got maybe 100 hours into it before quitting, and I, as I said a little bit earlier, didn't come back until July 2021, because I had been kind of thinking about starting streaming and content creation and all of that for a while now. And while I can't find the video, I distinctly remember watching Otsdarva's Dark Souls 2 hitlist video and getting more into his content by the Dark Souls stuff before coming across one of his videos that was somewhere along the lines of why you should stream Dead by Daylight. And it had a bunch of tips for doing so, and I was already kind of looking for a reason to stream, so there I went, and here I am now. So, SanSanSan, did you happen to play any Survivor before you began playing the Nemesis, or was it more of an instant click with him?
最初はサバイバープレイヤーでした。今でもサバイバーの方が気楽にプレイできます。
I was a Survivor player at first, and even now I feel like it's much more relaxing to play Survivor.
2020年1月頃から赤ワンエンブレムまで到達できるぐらいにキラーもプレイするようになりました。
Around January 2020 is when I think I really started playing enough killer to reach Iridescent 1.
そしてバイオハザードとの最初のコラボでネメシスをメインキラーにしたという流れですね。
Then, in 2021, when Nemesis came out, that's when I really started to play killer, as Nemesis, of course. I, too, also started Dead by Daylight as a Survivor player. I played David for the longest time before moving on to Jill. People that have stuck with my channel, like when I was a very small streamer, would know that I was pretty much David gaming all day, every day, up until like 1,000 followers or so. That's when I feel like I changed. Prior to the update that moved Prestige from a cap of 3 to a cap of 100, I was focused mainly on getting every single character to Prestige 3. I succeeded for the killers prior to the change, but as for survivors, I only got about half them done in time before the ranks changed. And I would very occasionally play the killer role, but it was kind of frustrating for me as a newer player. Keep in mind that at the time I still thought Cannibal was overpowered because he could insta-down me with his chainsaw and I didn't know where windows were. Looking back on that now, it kind of feels like the punchline of a joke, but the new player experience is really dated and hasn't changed much since then. I got bullied on Killer a lot, even to the point of tears, as Wraith with Lightburn against the Flashlight Squad where I couldn't even get it down, let alone a hook. And the role was kind of just off-putting until I started grinding out Dead by Daylight's hundreds of achievements. When I got to Nemesis and his achievement for whip downs, I didn't even know there was a leaderboard at that point. He just kind of clicked with me because my main point that I disliked about Killer was, you guessed it, playing pallets as an M1 killer. This killer doesn't even have to do that? That's amazing. And I also even briefly mained Plague when Boons came out, but that didn't really stick because Boons kind of fell off. But as for you, SanSanSan, what made you specifically decide to play the Nemesis? Was there an initial appeal, and what really drew you to him?
バイオハザードのキャラクターだったのが一番の理由です。
The main reason was that he was a Resident Evil killer.
ビジュアルも好きだし、能力もシンプルで、個人的には使いやすいキラーでした。
I really like the visuals and the simplicity of the tentacle strike itself, but he has depth as you play him more.
触手でサバイバーをダウンさせた時の楽しさがあって、楽しくプレイできるのがいいです。
And, of course, I like that he's fun to play. Getting it down with his power is satisfying. I'm very much the same way as far as the gameplay goes, but I have to admit that prior to playing Dead by Daylight, I hadn't even played a Resident Evil game. My first entry into the franchise was actually the RE1 remake, and I didn't really like it too much. The tank controls weren't fantastic for me. The lock camera, I wasn't really a huge fan, but then the Resident Evil 2 remake, which was over-the-shoulder third person, well, it was a pretty damn good game. I then played the rest of the story in order, and here we are. But as far as aesthetically, I didn't really put any stock into the fact that Nemesis and Dead by Daylight was from a well-known franchise because, well, I didn't really know about his whole deal at the time. I was just the bald guy with a tentacle, and I don't really feel like there was much past that. It's really funny that that's the case because of how often I've asked people in this series even if they've cared about the lore of their character, and a good portion of players just enjoy the gameplay because I was the exact same when I started. Now it's, different, seeing as how I've 100%ed the Resident Evil 3 remake and have since put thousands and thousands of hours into the killer himself. And speaking of thousands of hours, when do you feel like you knew all the ins and outs of the Nemesis? Do you feel like you've mastered him now, and how long did that take you?
ネメシスのプレイをマスターできたと言えるかはわからない。
Not sure I can say if I've mastered playing Nemesis.
今でも触手攻撃を繰り返し外すこともあるし。
I still miss tentacles all the time.
キラーとして成長するのは少なくとも1000時間以上かかったとは思う。
I'd say it took me about 1,000 hours or so before I knew what I was really doing. I was sort of in the same boat when it comes to that, because when I finally started to stick with a killer as my main in Dead by Daylight, which is very typical of me in games, I'm usually a master of one as opposed to a jack of all trades. I one-tricked in Dota 2 as Undying, I one-tricked in Heroes of the Storm as Nazebo, I one-tricked in League of Legends as Yorick, and now here I am, one-tricking again. I think around 1,000 hours is pretty fair to say for mastery of the character, seeing as how I'm in the exact same boat. I still ego whip sometimes, I miss 8 in a row, but that 9th one that hits, oh yeah, I'm that guy, pal. It just feels really good to hit, especially now with the patch 6.7.0 that buff Nemesis in a way that makes it so you have a cooldown reduction. It's only 1/4 of a second, but when you hit the power, you're rewarded for using the power by it being a shorter cooldown than if you missed. And it's faster than M1ing, it's satisfying, and it feels really good, even if I just missed 8 times in a row. But we don't have to talk about that part, it's fine. How do you feel about Nemesis's cosmetics as a licensed killer? Because there aren't a whole lot of options, though I definitely have a personal favorite, and it is not the orange one. But do you have any specific cosmetic you'd enjoy to see in the game, or are you happy with what he has right now?
この質問を受けたときは 2vs8 の前でしたが、 その間にクラシックコスチュームが追加されることになって嬉しいです。
When you sent me this question, it was before the 2v8 skin announcement, but I'm still happy to see that the classic costumes were added in the meantime.
それでも多くの選択肢があるわけではないので、版権の問題もあるだろうけど、いろいろと追加はしてほしいですね。
Still, there aren't too many options, and there'd be copyright issues if they did skins outside of Resident Evil itself. I'd still like more cosmetics.
他の人もよく言ってるが、RE3 のロケットランチャースキンもいつか追加してほしいと思ってます。
As others have said, I'd like to see the RE3 rocket launcher skin added at some point.
そのために腕でパーツが分かれているのだと最初から思ってました。
I even thought that from the beginning that's why the parts were separated by arms.
背が高いのがこのゲームにおいてはデメリットなので、RE3 の第2形態で背が低いのも欲しい。
And while it'd definitely be a gameplay advantage, I'd like to see a second form from Resident Evil 3 that's shorter, since being so tall is a disadvantage in DBD. It is actually fun that you bring up the rocket launcher thing cosmetically, because while I don't think it would work as an actual weapon, I do think it could be a neat cosmetic choice if it came with different animations for swinging it, like how Nemesis swings his fists. Sure. I just don't really enjoy when people bring it up as like, oh, we should just give Nemesis a tier 4 with the rocket launcher. It's a whole thing, but as far as full skins go, I have no real qualms about what we have. I love the 2v8 classic skin. It was legitimately mine and plenty of other people's dream skin before they announced it with the Resident Evil 2v8, and BHVR floated down and personally gave me a kiss on my forehead before handing it to me. I legitimately, the first thing I did when that patch dropped, I went to the store, I bought it, like same frame, it took me a single second, and I bought Classic Nemesis. It is absolutely gorgeous. It has like one minor clipping issue on the wrist, but other than that, I think it's perfect. But prior to being shown Classic Nemesis from 1999's Resident Evil 3, I admit I was a bit of a Resident Evil noob. I really wanted like a small headpiece only item for him that was from the opening of Resident Evil 3. It's a remake because it's like a very simple cosmetic. You could just overlay it and then put it with the rest of the set, and it would just be like his face covered by a Kevlar mask. I thought it was dope, and it would have been cool for like a small cosmetic. However, I still like the classic skin the most. But we could see that in the future. Maybe. Speaking of things that we love the most about the Nemesis, what is your absolute favorite part of him?
始めた理由と同じにはなりますが、ネメシスの触手でサバイバーをダウンさせることができた時が楽しいです。
It's the same reason as why I started maining him, but the simple things. I think it's satisfying when I down a survivor with the tentacle.
ビジュアルも好きだし、サウンドもデッドバイデイライトの中では特に好きですね。
I love the visuals, the feedback you get on a hit, especially the sound design in Dead by Daylight.
ネメシスを強いキラーだとは思っていないので、勝てた時の喜びは強いキラーよりも大きいと思います。
I also don't really consider Nemesis to be a very strong killer, so the joy I get when I win is greater than if I was playing a stronger killer. I'm kind of in the same boat. It's also part of the reason why I wouldn't really enjoy my killers suddenly going up in tier. I don't really enjoy the game as much when my downs are so quick, weirdly enough. Like when I play Hillbilly or another S-tier killer and I get a down 10 seconds into the game because I ran straight into them, it's just like, okay, I just win now, I guess. Strength-wise, I feel like Nemesis is pretty much perfect. I think he just needs a couple of bug fixes and an add-on pass, and then I would be good to go. I totally agree with everything you've said. You know, the hits feel good, the sound design is great, especially on tiering up from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3, especially that survivors can hear it. It's kind of like impending doom in a way. Maybe less so when I hit tier 3 with one generator left, but I digress. Sometimes the early game can be really rough, but with the changes to add-ons, especially Marvin's Blood, as well as the updates to his early game, making him need one less point to rank up to tier 2, it's not as much of a pain point anymore. But is there anything that you don't like about Nemesis?
特に嫌いなところはないですが、
There's nothing I particularly dislike about it, but
デッドバイデイライトのネメシスについては恐怖感が少ないことだと思う。
the thing with him is that in Dead by Daylight at least, there isn't much fear.
大きな足音でゆっくり近づいてくるだけなので。
It's just loud footsteps slowly approaching. Yeah, that's definitely one of the parts that I was most surprised about when I went to play Resident Evil 3's remake for the first time. The dynamic was completely different than what I had expected. I expected more tentacle strikes, I guess. I think over the entire course of my 100%ing RE3 remake, I got hit by the tentacle maybe once or twice. Instead, he was just sprinting at me and landing haymakers on my poor Jill. As far as the translation from canon to Dead by Daylight, I really don't feel like Nemesis was done too well. There's a video here by Zozo that's really good and covers it pretty much in depth, but I could definitely see Resident Evil fans being disappointed with his speed when in canon he runs faster than the Blight, but I can separate Dead by Daylight Nemesis from the canon Nemesis, and I enjoy them more as separate characters or different iterations rather than just like a one-to-one like copy-paste from the games. It's like the same thing with the rocket launcher, which is inarguably the Nemesis's most iconic weapon. It just wouldn't work in Dead by Daylight, in my opinion, and believe me, I get this question a lot. No, it would not work for Dead by Daylight. There's no way you're going to make a rocket launcher work in the sphere and the scope of this game, and while, yes, I agree it would be dope as hell, there's just no way to make it balance, because if it isn't an AoE insta-down, it's not really a rocket launcher. And if it is AoE insta-down, how on earth would you balance that so it doesn't feel overpowered over everything else in the game? It's just not really something the behavior wanted to worry about, so we didn't get it. It fits the lore, you know, the entity buffs and nerfs characters as it needs, and then done and dusted. We can't really do anything past that now, so Nemesis is the tentacle whip killer in Dead by Daylight, and he's my personal favorite regardless. But speaking of favorites, what's your favorite map? And how about your least favorite?
ネメシスのベストマップはギデオンかと思います。
I think you'll agree. I think that the best map for Nemesis is Gideon.
チェイスで有利な場所が多いし、移動距離も少ない場合が多いので。
There are so many places where you have an advantage in chase, and in many cases less distance to travel.
パレットは多いけど。
There are way too many pallets, though.
ワーストはありすぎて困るけど、喜びの庭かな。
Worst? There's so many to choose from, but for me personally, I'd have to say Garden of Joy.
個人的に嫌いなマップも同じです。
Pretty much the same reason for any other map I personally dislike.
とにかくプレイしててしんどいマップです。
It's just a really difficult map to play.
ビジュアルがほとんどの理由になるけど、好きなマップはラクーン警察署です。
My favorite one, though, of course, is the Raccoon City Police Station, especially for the visuals. Yeah, no notes on most of this, really. Gideon is definitely my best map, and RPD is definitely my favorite map to be on. Survivor's pre-running on RPD is a little bit obnoxious, but you can kind of sneak up on people due to its two-story nature if you know exactly where they are and they don't know where you are due to auras or whatever. But the aesthetic is completely unmatched. I get a smile on my face, genuinely, when I get sent to Gideon or RPD. Honorable mention to Midwich Elementary, which definitely also feels like a fantastic map for him, but I think that's just kind of a fantastic map for Killer in general. And I think while you said that Garden of Joy was your least favorite map, I actually kind of like it. Not because the entire map is good, like I will say that the main building is pretty bad, but I have a personal preference for Garden of Joy, Greenville Square, and the upcoming Five Nights at Freddy map just because of the shack having a window that I can hit through. And no, I don't mean the one that you can vault, the other window off to the side. I get plenty of hits through it. It's not really expected unless I've already done it before, and I just love that that shack is unique. But I definitely have to say, I'm a big fan of RPD. Easily my favorite map. And speaking of being a big fan of something, how frequently do you run into people that are big fans of Nemesis and people that know of you specifically? How do you feel the Dead by Daylight community feels about Nemesis? And do you think he's especially liked or disliked by Survivor players?
ゲーム内では1ヶ月に1回会うかぐらいでしょうか。
In-game, I'd say that we probably see each other once a month or so.
私は YouTube などもしていないし、X でたまにツイートするくらいなので、積極的にコミュニケーションは取っていないので。
I don't personally do YouTube or any content creation, and I only very occasionally tweet on X and Twitter, so I don't interact with the community very much.
日本ではゲーム内チャットはたまに使われる程度なので、ネメシスが嫌いだとしてもわからないですね。
In-game chat is only occasionally used in Japan, so I just don't personally understand why people dislike Nemesis, if at all.
強いキラーではないから、ヘイトは少ないとは感じています。
I feel like there isn't much hate because he isn't a strong killer.
プレイするのが楽しいキラーで、バイオハザードのキャラクターという理由で、キラープレイヤーの使用率は高い方のキラーだと思います。
I think that he's a character that's highly used because he's fun to play, and also a character from Biohazard or Resident Evil. I'd say that I have a dissimilar point of view on the Nemesis. at least seeing as how I'm literally a content creator for Nemesis, and I'm very much, posting, tweeting, what have you about the Nemesis. Lots of public stuff for Nemesis. In America, at least, where I'm from, I'm not familiar with any of the European servers or the Japanese servers or the Oceanic servers because, I live in America, so I play on American servers. Crazy concept, I know. But here, at least, the endgame chat, it's used a lot, and I can't say I get hate specifically because of my character choice. I definitely get some wonky hits and people disconnect and they give up, and that's neither here nor there. But I think that most of the people here that play the character do so because he's fun, as well as a healthy mix of what you said, people that like him because he's from Resident Evil and just he has a satisfying power, sound design, etc., etc., etc. Like he just has like a perfect storm of like stuff that's just nice to play as. And he's from Resident Evil. Do you personally enjoy the Resident Evil series? Are you like a big lore fan, or are you like me in my early days and do you strictly play him because of his gameplay as opposed to being a fan of the series and the source material that he's from?
バイオハザードのファンです。大ファンには負けるが、一通りのバイオハザードは見てきました。
I am a fan of Resident Evil. Not a super fan or anything, but I've seen all of it, even the movies.
賛否あると思うが、個人的には RE3 のネメシスが好きです。
I know that the game itself has pros and cons, but I personally like RE3 Remake's Nemesis.
ビジュアルが特に。
Especially the visuals.
もちろんクラシックな方も良いとは思っています。
But of course, the classic is excellent as well.
キャラクターとしても好きだし、プレイスタイルも好きだから、ネメシスをメインキラーにしています。
To answer your question, a little bit of both. I like Nemesis as a character and I like his playstyle, which is, why I made him. Yeah, I'm exactly the same way, actually. While, yeah, I've played Resident Evil 3 Remake a good amount of times, just 100% it, I never really got into the same cycle with the other games because they didn't click as much. I played the Resident Evil 4 Remake maybe 3 times, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a fantastic game, but I don't even think I've done multiple runs of 5, 6, 7, 8, just one and done. I got the story and I left. Maybe I'll go back eventually? I don't know. As far as Resident Evil 3 Remake's quality, Nemesis was a little bit disappointing from being an actual stalker type enemy like Mr. X in the previous title, Resident Evil 2, because I just came from Mr. X and he was, he follows you the whole game, and Nemesis kind of felt like he was reduced to being a scripted appearance character rather than like something you actually had to worry about. And the fact that the game itself was so short. I know a lot of long-term fans were disappointed by its length and how much was cut, notably the clock tower section, but it was still a fun game. It just doesn't feel like a $60 full price fun game in my opinion. Nemesis's transformations were still terrifying. I went in completely blind. I knew nothing about the series, and I have to say that the Inferno difficulty, which is the highest, is like playing Dark Souls, especially the last boss. He was insanely tough to beat, and man, just how tough do you think Nemesis is in Dead by Daylight? That is, how powerful of a character do you think he is? I know tier lists in Japan are different than ones here, but where would you put him, strength-wise, if you had to?
ネメシスは中間クラスの上の方かなと思います。一番弱いポイントは、早く遠くへ移動する手段を持っていないことです。
I think Nemesis is slightly above the middle of the roster. Here in Japan, the weakest point for killers is not having map traversal or map pressure.
強いと言えるキラーたちはその能力を持っているのがほとんどだと思う。
Most killers that are strong do have the ability to traverse the map.
なのでネメシスはハイレベルな4人のサバイバーが相手だと厳しいし、私がサバイバーでネメシスと当たっても緊張感は感じないです。
So Nemesis is hard when I'm up against 4 high-level survivors, and when I'm personally playing against Nemesis as a survivor, I don't feel much tension.
しかしチェイス能力は高いとは思います。
However, I do think his chase ability is really good.
ナースやブライトとは比べ物にならない程度ですが。
Although it's nothing compared to Nurse or Blight or something. Yeah, that's about pretty much exactly the same that we have here. Nemesis is slightly above the middle, so mid to high B tier. And he does, have next to no map traversal outside of haste perks outside of chase. I think if Nemesis ever got map mobility, like a dash or something, he would definitely shoot up the tiers just because of how good his chase power currently is. That being said, I don't want him to be at the tiers of Nurse or Blight. I do think that those two need to be toned down a little bit, but as you said, it definitely feels like a struggle sometimes when I have to play against like really good survivors. I'm lucky to even get like 4 or 5 hooks if the map is rough, like Badham or something. But speaking of rough, Nemesis's add-ons are pretty rough. Do you think that they're well-balanced, over-undertuned? What do you personally enjoy running?
ネメシスのアドオンは選択肢が少なくて、いろいろなバリエーションのネメシスをプレイできるようにしてほしいのが本音です。
The add-ons have very few options, and I really want to be able to play different variations of the Nemesis.
マービンの血は一番消費したアドオンです。
Marvin's Blood is the add-on I use the most.
今までのほとんどのマッチで使っている。
I use it almost every match.
リッカーの下は選択肢のレベルまで強くなってくれて嬉しい。
While talking about add-on changes, I'm really glad that Liquor Tongue is actually usable now.
他はインクリボンとセロトニンを使います。
Other than those, I mainly use ink ribbon and serotonin. It's pretty funny hearing that because there are borderline no other add-ons to run besides Marvin's Blood and Liquor Tongue, really. Ink Ribbon for move speed is fine, and I used to run Serotonin Injector comboed with the T-Virus sample back in the day before Marvin's Blood gave you tier 2 in 2 hits, which feels fantastic, by the way. I think a lot of his add-ons are kind of lackluster at the absolute kindest and useless at the worst. Like, don't get me wrong, it feels so good that Liquor Tongue finally has a use after, 3 years of doing literally nothing? 2.4 seconds of slowdown across an entire trial, assuming you get 8 contaminations. Yeesh. But yeah, I do wish for a full add-on pass someday. He has maybe 4 or 5 add-ons that are actually worth running, and if you don't run them, he just kind of feels worse for a lack of having them. Like you have the Liquor Tongue, which just gives you a little bit more slowdown on your contaminations. You have Marvin's Blood, easily his best add-on. Serotonin Injector, I think it could handle being buffed a little bit so that the stealth mechanic is like actually worth doing because you have to go get a zombie, which is RNG based, and then worry about that. And then like Ink Ribbon is just nice passively, and then Shattered Stars badge is Shattered Stars badge, but like everything else is just kind of a waste of running it. Like I've never looked at a game and been like, yes, I should run any Alpha Parasite. Yes, I should run the 2 wristbands. It's just like, they don't feel great. But what else do you run, perk-wise? Do you think he has any perks that he uses better than any other killer in Dead by Daylight?
堕落か追跡者は入れることが多いですね。
Surprising nobody, I usually run Corrupt or Lethal Pursuer.
これらがないと序盤すぐに3台の発電機がなくなってしまう。
Without running one of these two, I often lose generators very early.
不協和音などのゾンビを誘導できるパークは他のキラーよりメリットがあると思います。
Perks that can direct zombies, such as Discordance, are much more beneficial to Nemesis than any other killer.
入れた方が良いというレベルのメリットではないと思いますが。
I don't, however, have a specific percentage power increase. Corrupt or Lethal are definitely staples in my builds as well. A bit of a beating a dead horse statement, but Nemesis needs something for early game, or he just loses steam while trying to tier up. Even the first chase of the game can be game losing if it lasts too long. I think Discordance is only really good when you're playing against people that do stack on generators, and don't get me wrong, it can definitely get some usage, sure, but I've found that Surveillance is probably the perk that Nemesis uses uniquely the best, mainly when comboed with Hex Ruin, because of the unique way that Surveillance adds information. It increases the range that you can hear affected generators being worked on by 8 meters, and that 8 meter range increase also applies to zombies. So zombies get a significantly larger sphere of influence. They're still RNG dependent, of course, so that's something, but while I just talked about Ruin, zombies do also technically defend hexes better than any other killer because you don't even have to be there. But Ruin especially, because they can then also force Ruin value by being next to a generator that's being worked on, and you don't. And you can't really work on a generator if a zombie is eating you. So a good build for Nemesis specifically, could be Ruin, Face the Darkness, Surveillance, Dead Man Switch, or you could just swap Dead Man Switch for Undying to really keep your totems alive. And I do sometimes feel silly asking these types of questions, especially with my also being a Nemesis main. The first and last time that'll happen on this series, by the way. But do you have any specific bugs or techniques or anything like that that a newer player wouldn't know? Like, we know how to do the whip drag, we know how to do a zom drop, anything else that you might have in your back pocket that's like a secret?
みんなが知っているようなもの以外は見つけてないですね。
I haven't found anything other than what everyone seems to know already.
ウェスカーのような能力であれば、いろんなテクニックがありそうですが。
With abilities like Wesker or other killers, there are all sorts of techniques. Yeah, that's kind of exactly where I am too. It's kind of a hard power to innovate with because it's just so simple. You can drag the whip's hitbox. You can drop a contaminated survivor on a zombie to stop them from wiggling off for free to counter sabos. And I love doing that, by the way. But as far as anything like crazy, like a hug tech from Wesker, the one that Blight had for a while, like, no. Nothing insane tech-wise. I have something that I'm kind of calling a horseshoe tech, but it's just like a range of motion that you do to perform it. It's nothing super crazy like Wesker. However, even with the whip drag, I get people saying it's unfair or giving up as a result of it, which I know you can't see the whip's hitbox from the point of view of the survivor, which is another one of Nemesis's many bugs, as well as just not playing the animation of him throwing the whip, etc. But with giving up and that type of thing in America, at least, and Europe, OCE, etc., even though I don't live there, there's currently a community issue happening where survivor players will disconnect from the match or by attempting to kill themselves on the hook upon the slightest of inconveniences. We've been calling this the Go Next epidemic, but in Japan, do you have a similar type of thing going on as well, where survivors will just give up? And while this was asked relatively early and they have since announced that they are going to be doing something about it, I'd still want to get your input for how it was for clarity. But for context, BHVR has announced that they will be removing the self-unhook mechanic at the first chase of the game to make it so people can't give up early on.
そういう呼び方は日本ではないですが、こちらでもそういうプレイヤーはいます。
We don't call it the Go Next epidemic here in Japan, but players like that do exist here.
そのマッチが面白くなくなってしまうので、そういうプレイヤーとは次は一緒には遊びたくないですね。
I have to say I don't really want to play with such players again, as it makes the match so much less interesting. But yeah, here, for a while at least, it's been pretty rough. Disconnects, going next, etc. A lot of the time, games just feel like a waste of time because someone leaves it after getting personally dunked on. Like, I've legitimately had people that have chases that last 2 or 3 full generators, and they would instantly go next on their first hook. It's super frustrating to me, as, like, I always hear, like, oh, just take the win. And I don't want to do that because I don't feel like I worked for it. It's partially even the reason why I play the Nemesis. Like, I don't want the game to be that easy. I want to actually outplay people, deserve it, have fun, and Behavior's been cooking up something recently, and it sounds pretty good on paper, but it's not coming out until, later this month, which is June of 2025, for those in the future listening to this. I hope that it works, I really do, and I kind of hope that, going forward, we're not going to have to worry about that type of thing, because it's been a really big plague on the game for a long time at this point. So I hope that whatever they cook up is going to be satisfactory and increase the longevity of the game itself, for killers and survivors even. But how about you, though? You're a pretty big survivor player as well. You brought that up. Just for a completely unbiased point of view, how do you enjoy playing against the Nemesis? Do you think that he has any, especially big frustrations that he causes survivors with his power or his contamination of zombies, anything like that? Do you think he has, glaring issues?
サバイバーではもちろんネメシスと対戦したいです。
Of course I want to play against Nemesis as a survivor.
特にチェイスをしたいですね。
I especially want to play Chase.
触手のタイミングの駆け引きが楽しいです。
I really enjoy tactically timing and dodging the tentacle.
こういったチェイスでの駆け引きがあるキラーとの対戦が一番好きです。
My favorite type of survivor games is those against those killers that have this type of gameplay and Chase. But yeah, I can see from a survivor point of view, well, you can't actually see it from a point of view, which is kind of the problem. The whip drag, at least, is the most egregious example for unfairness that exists, honestly. It looks fine from our point of view as the Nemesis, but it's definitely something that looks really bad for survivors. Sometimes the throwing of the whip animation doesn't even play, and it's definitely insane when I watch back a streamer's VOD and it looks like they got struck by a ghost, because I don't even have the animation of throwing the whip. I just kind of slide around the corner and then they get injured because I hit them with my mind. It's the same thing with zombies. They're sort of passive value for Nemesis and an active hindrance to survivors. You might not notice it while playing as the Nemesis, but a lot of their value is silent. Maybe Craig or Julia stopped a generator from popping. Maybe they stopped a heal, etc. Things in the background that make you win the game that you don't even really notice. It's kind of frustrating when people say that they want zombies buffed on Nemesis when it's like, I only really need a couple of things with zombies. I just want them to not get stuck. That's the major one. And then like have some way to redirect them. Not necessarily like, hey, my zombies come to this corner and don't let them leave. Like nothing like that. But just like sometimes I don't want to run 50 meters across the map to unstick a zombie because he's in a corner that doesn't matter. Nemesis's zombie value is very like passive value, just like inherently, oh, my character's better now because my zombies are better. Like maybe you could give them a little bit more move speed or a little bit more FOV, but like nothing crazy. I just think that I would want more power in Nemesis's actual whip and tentacle and kit, because that's like my agency in chase as a killer, rather than like, okay, I win more now because my zombies are better and they're just winning the game for me. But while we're talking about winning, in the English-speaking sphere of Dead by Daylight, at least, because again, I'm not familiar with other ones, there are content creators that try their best to win hundreds, if not thousands, of games in a row. Previous interviews that I've done in this very series, such as Super Al for Nurse, Numia for Hillbilly, Momo7th for Oni, and he even has a Blight streak as well, have streaks that go on over 1,000 games. I've done a very casual win streak with loose rules, you know, a 2k tie, 3k win. It was alright. I lost at 78 wins, but how do you personally feel about win streaking? Do you think Nemesis has any notable advantages during win streaks, and have you ever done one?
私は連勝を気にしたことがないです。
I have never personally cared for win streaks.
私は楽しむ目的でゲームをプレイしているので、あまり高い目標を設定せずに楽しむようにしています。
I played the game for the purpose of having fun, so I just try and enjoy without setting extremely high goals for myself like that.
ネメシスはそれほど強いキラーだとは思っていないので、連勝はとても高い目標だと感じますね。
Again, I don't think Nemesis is that strong of a killer, so I feel that a win streak is a very high goal.
動画や配信のコンテンツでは、連勝は見る側の楽しみにもなるので、それは良いアイデアですよね。
But of course, it's a good idea for video and streaming content because win streaks can be fun for the viewer. Yeah, it's definitely a tough thing to maintain over weeks, months, years even. I'd say the strongest thing about Momo's Blight streak wasn't even necessarily the number itself, which, don't get me wrong, it's extremely impressive. But the sheer mental fortitude that had to be put forth to play at that high of a level for that many games in a row without dropping a single loss is seriously impressive. I have a lot of respect for all the people that can do it longer than I could. You know, I just said I got one to 78, and that was kind of cheesing the rules just because, like, I'm kind of a casual player. I didn't really want to, you know, sweat for a 3k on Nemesis. It's just not really fun for me. And it was a neat experiment, but I really don't think it's my cup of tea personally. It also really led me to getting a lot of accusations for what some Survivor players don't understand about our killer, the Nemesis. Sometimes people just complain about things they don't get, and they just don't want to learn the counterplay or what they did wrong. For Nemesis, the whip drag is a very specific example. And do you think there's any really common misconceptions about Nemesis? And if you could just give it to people, if you could make everybody understand something about Nemesis, what would it be?
日本でも SNS でキラー vs サバイバーの文句の言い合いはよく見ます。
I see a lot of killer versus survivor, us versus them complaining on social networking sites in Japan.
特にトンネルの話題は多いですね。
Especially a lot of talk about tunneling.
両方を私はソロで数千時間以上プレイしてきたので、それぞれ言いたいことはわかるが、それぞれの利益の奪い合いのような話なので、言い合っても結論を出すのは難しい問題だと思う。
I know what each side has to say as I played both of them solo for thousands of hours each, but I think it's a difficult issue to make a conclusive statement on, even if they try to have a discussion, as it's a competition for each side's respective interest.
だから私が言えるようなことはないですね。
So there isn't really a lot that I can say.
ネメシスに関しては、最近は文句を言われることはないです。
As for Nemesis, I don't really get a lot of complaints these days.
私がコンテンツクリエイターではないから言われることも少ないのかもしれません。
Maybe it's because I'm not a content creator, but I'm sure you get told plenty. Oh yeah, you can bet that I get a lot of comments talking about things that people don't really get. The whip drag, how I'm playing on a VPN, lag switching, cheating, literally everything under the sun. I do get, believe me, I do understand that the whip drag looks really bad. And a lot of hits are based on how the survivor's pill-shaped hitbox works, but it's still really annoying when I'm being told in the comments of my own video that I'm lagging to get the hits that I'm getting when I'm playing a game like Dead by Daylight that has in-game ping that you can check at the beginning of the match, which I often do, and indicators on the screen for when you're lagging, and neither of which were present, and I still get accused of lagging. It's crazy sometimes. Like, this one specific person ended up deleting their comments because I was making fun of them for a bit about it, but I very clearly can get hits like that. As far as understanding, I think that in general, I wish the player base was a little bit more open to actually learning how to play against killers, or even Survivor, because it's frustrating stomping out a few people that just play like a couple games after work after their 9 to 5, because matchmaking sucks. I want everyone to have fun playing a game and not just me win every time because they don't know how to look behind them and chase. And as far as playing against the Nemesis goes, I made a guide for how to play against the Nemesis. It's out now. You can check that out. Humble Self promo. Go check it out if you haven't already. But speaking of learning, what advice would you give someone that's trying to learn playing Nemesis for the first time?
ネメシスは触手以外は基本的なキラーの使い方と一緒で、その部分が一番最初は重要だと考えています。
Nemesis is the same as a basic M1 killer's usage except for the tentacle, and the fundamentals are most important at first.
触手はその後で大丈夫だけど、ホースラーさんのコンテンツを見て学びましょう。
Tentacles are fine to use after that, but watch and learn from Mr. Horceror's content.
ただ、常に勝ちたいという目的があるならおすすめはできないから、ナースを練習した方が良いと思う。
But if your goal in Dead by Daylight is killers to always win, I don't recommend it, but you should practice and play the nurse instead.
キャラクターへの愛、もしくはプレイスタイルを好きになって楽しんでネメシスをプレイしてほしいです。
I think the most important thing is to love the character or love the playstyle. As for me, I love both of these things about the Nemesis. I promise SanSanSan was not a paid actor saying to just watch Horceror, forehead, but it does actually mean a lot to me that he thinks highly enough of me to recommend me to people trying to learn Nemesis for the first time. Watch the Ultimate Nemesis Guide if you haven't already. My main tip is to just go for hits. Like, duh, use your power. Fantastic advice, Horceror, thank you. No, but really, you don't know what you can do until you try. Sucking at something is the first step to getting kinda good at something. Just try to M1 as little as possible and practice using your tentacle as much as you can. You'll learn stuff like when to drop chase and go for someone else with time. Use the whip, chase good survivors, and learn your limits. And of course, after you learn how to use the tentacle, your distances, your hits you can get, you will start weaving in M1s every once in a while. It's not illegal, but you gotta use your power to practice your power, so try not to do it too much. But now, how about updates to the Nemesis? How do you feel BHVR has been treating him? Do you think the buffs, nerfs, etc. have been fair? And how do you feel Nemesis has been treated by the game changing around him with new maps, new perks, etc.?
ネメシスに関してはもともと強いキラーではなかったのに、一度マービンがナーフされ、時を経て強化されたのは理解できないですね。
For Nemesis, I don't really understand why they decided to nerf Marvin's Blood and then make it stronger again later, when Nemesis wasn't that strong of a killer to begin with.
全体的には私が始めた当初に比べると、かなりサバイバーが強くなりました。
Survivor overall has become much stronger than when I first started playing.
これは強いキラーも追加されてきたから仕方がないのもあるかもしれません。
This may be in part due to stronger killers being released, but as far as that goes, the longer a game lasts, power creep is inevitable.
ただ、その流れについていけてないキラーは多くいるので、それらのキラーからすると公平だとは言えないですね。
There are many killers that simply have not kept up with the trend, so I can't say it's incredibly fair for those killers specifically. The Marvin's Blood change, the first one at least, was due to BHVR's, at the time, perspective of simply looking at the numbers. Every Nemesis player was running the add-on because it was overpowered in Behavior's eyes, instead of seeing the part where every other add-on wasn't ran because they were bad. Kind of a survivorship bias type of view. But the rest I agree with. I run perks simply because I think exhaustions are too strong, and I often feel like I'm funneled into certain builds with more and more slowdown if I want to even stand a chance at winning a game. Of course, like you, I often play for fun, and I don't really worry about whether or not I secure 4 kills in a single game. It still feels a little bit odd when I get teabagged or someone is bad-mannered by a survivor at the gate who feels like they won over me when I go out of my way to give everyone 2 hooks before any kills, or if I have a 9-hook 1-kill game, etc. I still stick with Nemesis, not really because he's the strongest killer, just like we said earlier, the most important thing is I love the playstyle. I tried the Xenomorph, which is probably the closest thing we have to transferable skills, with the tail attack being similar to the tentacle, but it just feels clunkier, on top of being extremely short in crawler mode. I'm not a big fan of the POV. Speaking of transferring skills, do you think Nemesis gives us transferable skills to other killers, or even outside of Dead by Daylight?
デッドバイデイライトの他のキラーを使うスキルは身につくと思います。
I think that you can learn the skills to use other killers in Dead by Daylight.
基本的な部分が必要なキラーなので。
Because every killer requires the basics.
デッドバイデイライト自体が簡単な操作のゲームなので、他のゲームへはあまり役立たないかと思います。
Dead by Daylight is a game with relatively simple controls, so I don't think that there's too much to be learned from playing it for other games.
強くないキャラで勝つための試行錯誤する能力は身につくかもしれません。
Maybe the ability to use trial and error to win with a character that's less strong than others. I feel that for sure. Maybe my knowledge to look for things that are more macro play based rather than micro play, but I can definitely say I haven't looked at another game and been like, wow, my Nemesis knowledge will really put in some work here. It's a simple game, as you said, and Nemesis is relatively simple. As far as the off-meta thing goes, that's pretty much all I've ever played in anything. Like I mentioned before, Nazebo was a specialist that threw spiders and toads in Heroes of the Storm. Yorick was a very unpopular juggernaut for top lane in League of Legends with ghouls and the Maiden of the Mist. Undying was a massive hulking zombie that I played off lane in Dota 2. And now Nemesis. Nothing has ever been an S tier. I have always found success by practicing something and becoming skilled at something and knowing what I was doing and not just like playing S tier meta and then getting carried by the character. So I feel like I personally am also just an off meta type of player. Now, Dead by Daylight is pretty much the meta when it comes to asymmetrical horror games. Every other one that came after it since has died for the most part. Texas Chainsaw Massacre just announced recently that they were stopping making content for the game. How long do you think it'll be until Dead by Daylight experiences the same? How long is Dead by Daylight going to last?
難しい質問で、私には明確な数字は出せないです。
That's a difficult question, and I don't think I can give you a specific answer.
まだ数年以上続くと思っているが、全盛期は終わっているように感じます。
I feel as if the heyday is over, but I definitely think it will last a few more years.
チームチャーツというサイトを参考にしてますが、ネメシスが追加された時がピークで、それ以降は超えられていないですよね。
Referring to Steam charts, Dead by Daylight's player count peaked when the Nemesis was added, and it hasn't been surpassed since.
でも私が始めた2018年よりはまだプレイヤーも多いので、これからも頑張って維持してほしいです。
However, there are still more players now than there were in 2018 when I first started, so I hope that BHVR keeps up the good work and maintains the game for a long time to come. Now, personally, I think that the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter is definitely going to be a revitalization of the game as a whole. It's a massive license here in the West, at least, in terms of new horror franchises, which are those after the 2000s and before. So a lot of people think that it's going to surpass the Nemesis's release in terms of player numbers, and I agree with them. Five Nights at Freddy's is huge. It'll definitely be a license that catapults Dead by Daylight forward again, and I'm unsure if there'd be another license or chapter that has the ability to pull that much attention towards it afterwards. Even the big ones like Jason and the Friday the 13th license that he's from, I don't really see it happening. But honestly, I don't see Dead by Daylight dying, ever. I think it would only ever stop if behavior, as of how it currently is, simply got bored with it. But I don't really think that's going to be the case. It kind of feels like it's been a passion project for so long, and while the devs do get dunked on a lot, like, you can't deny that they have passion and enjoy the game, and they like making it. And just like all the community managers and the people there working on it, it's always been nice to see that they want to make Dead by Daylight. And I couldn't imagine this game being made by like Ubisoft or EA or something like that. I don't think it would have the same success. Getting bored, giving up on something, not finding success. My last question for you, what would be your final straw that just makes you quit playing Nemesis for good, forever? Just drop him.
家族のためにやめることはあるかもしれないが、私の娯楽の一つとしてプレイし続けたいと思う。
I may quit for the sake of my family, but I would still continue to play it as one of my pastimes.
楽しむためなので、楽しめなくなってしまった場合もやめることはあると思う。
I play Dead by Daylight and the Nemesis for my enjoyment.
その時はホースラーさん、残されたネメシスプレイヤーとして頑張ってください。
Until then, Horceror, do your best as the remaining Nemesis player. This one kind of hits the most for me, as while obviously one's family comes first, I feel a little silly even saying it, but I kind of feel like a kinship with SanSanSan, because ever since I've started looking at the leaderboard, he's always been at the top of it. Ever since the first day I knew a leaderboard existed. He's been like the dream and aspiration to be where he was since the time I really started maining Nemesis. And as I type this out, as I voice this out, I'm the second in the world behind him. And it's going to be a little bit bittersweet when I pass him. I guess I should say something here about taking the mantle of someone that you looked up to, but I'm not always great with words. I'm very appreciative to SanSanSan that I was even able to have this interview, despite the language barrier, and that the experience was a positive one. I want to thank Indigo Ninja, because I didn't even know he had a Twitter, and she's also a pretty swell Nemesis unknown player. You should check her out if you haven't already. But she even let me know that there was a Twitter to contact him with to even attempt to do this, because like I have no idea who else I would have talked to. I would have just been talking to myself the whole time. This episode has probably been the most unique one that I've done so far, since it was kind of scripted out to deal with the language barrier from before. As far as an outro goes, I don't really have a similar one for SanSanSan, seeing as he isn't a creator, just a kindred spirit that enjoys the Nemesis on a similar level with me. You can still, regardless, follow him on Twitter here. His wife makes Dead by Daylight dioramas that are very nice. We mentioned them briefly earlier, and all the rest of the links are just going to be mine, I guess. I don't really know what else to do. My YouTube, that you're already on. My Twitch, where I stream 4 days a week at 6 p.m. PST, with Community Swift Nights on Friday. The rest of it's just Nemesis. My TikTok, where I upload the same thing as my shorts, if you prefer it over shorts. And my Twitter, where I post art and shitpost. And my Discord, where you can come join the community that we've been building together. All links below. This has been Horceror. Whether it be day, morning, noon, evening, or night for you, I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. Thanks for watching. Soshite SanSanSan. Arigato.